I am New York.
Yes, I'm New York.
I am New York.
Yo soy Nueva York.
Sono New York.
Je suis New York.
We are New York.
Welcome to Diverse City, where we explore New York's eclectic enclaves, one neighborhood at a time. I'm Zyphus Lebrun. This month, we're approaching the show very differently, as the country and the world continue to confront the COVID-19 pandemic. Normally, I'd be on location in a New York neighborhood, with stories focused on that particular area. However, this month, I'm hosting from home, and our producers have been virtually visiting different neighborhoods as they continue to find innovative ways of storytelling while obeying state and federal orders to stay home in an effort to slow the spread of this disease. On this episode, spousal support, one woman's effort to protect her husband and other heroic health professionals. Locked down, Italians struggling with mental health consequences of long-term quarantine. And pandemic pardon, protecting those incarcerated during a chaotic time. Those stories and more coming up on Diverse City. The spouse of a doctor called to the front lines to fight the COVID-19 virus has started a GoFundMe campaign to raise money to purchase the highly coveted N95 mask for her husband and other medical professionals. She spoke with us about some of the challenges she and her husband are facing. She asked that we not use her full name or identify her husband at a time when hospitals are threatening to fire employees who speak to the media.
He steps onto this and he's not allowed to step into anything else. He takes off his mask and puts it over there.
That's part of a very elaborate entry process that Janice and her husband have adopted when he arrives home from work. They rightly named the area the COVID Corner, but they're taking the threat he faces every day when he goes to work at a major New York hospital very seriously.
Right now, they do temperature checks as you enter. So you line up in the hospital and they temperature check you. If you have a low fever or any kind of fever, they get you tested and you're not allowed to come to the hospital. He saw his coworker like in the same line and she had a low fever. And we found out a couple of days ago that she was also tested positive as well.
Her concerns are heightened because her immune system is not at 100% because of a recent surgical procedure.
Every time I have like an itchy throat, I'm like, wait, do I have it? Like, or is it just like, oh, because I just had to clear my throat kind of thing? It's always lingering in my mind. And like, even when it's just been very stressful overall.
Rather than being overwhelmed by her stress, she's decided to start a GoFundMe campaign to purchase 1,000 N95 masks from a distributor in China. The masks are much coveted because they offer better protection against airborne infection. Right now, her husband reuses his because he can't get them from the hospital.
We have 5 and we're rotating it and they're disposable, but we reuse them because we just don't have the supply. And we're hoping that after a few days that we're praying that it is actually the virus will go away. So he'll go back in his new rotation and start on the first mask again.
In the meantime, she and her husband continue a regimen that includes limited physical contact and not sharing household utensils. Small sacrifices, she says, compared to others.
I feel very blessed because right now we don't have kids yet, but the people who I've been talking to with kids and they're in front line, it's been really tough on them, especially not being able to. I have another friend who is a nurse. She has a 4-year-old kid and she hasn't been able to hug him for the last like 3-4 weeks already now. They've been like video chatting and things like that. Even though they're in the same home, they're not able to see each other. So it's just really heartbreaking a lot of the times.
When COVID-19 emerged from Wuhan, China, most countries didn't anticipate widespread outbreaks in communities and neighborhoods on the other side of the world. However, the virus is proving that our global neighbors are not so distant after all. On March 9, 2020, the Italian government ordered a national quarantine in an effort to contain the spreading disease. The lockdown measures were received positively by Italians. However, some critics have come to regard these measures as the largest elimination of constitutional rights in Italy since the end of World War II. Our producer, Bruno Giuliani, has friends and family in Italy. He looks back at the situation there through the personal account of Maria, a social worker confined to her parents' home in a small village in Sicily.
All'interno di questo piccolo mondo che è quattro mura, mi alzo la mattina, faccio il caffè, incontro i miei, mi metto a scrivere, canto, risalgo su, scherzo con mia madre, faccio il possibile per scherzare. Quando c'è buon tempo, tipo la mattina, non solo do il buongiorno a casa, ma apro le finestre e comincio a gridare, dando il buongiorno a tutti.
E sentimi che canto.
Ciao Marielle!
Come stiamo?
Bene, bene!
Com'è? Che fai? Facci su caffè?
Sì, a posto, devo andare a pigliare a distanza.
A distanza però, sempre a distanza. Ah, magari più tardi via video si può fare. Va bene picciotti, resistiamo!
Poi chiamo i gattini randaggi, loro si avvicinano, io scendo davanti alla porta che c'ho una ciotola, gli do da mangiare.
Ti hai chiamato, Gioia, ti hai chiamato? Bella figlia.
E ogni sera, dopo le 18, si alzano questi droni per controllare il paese. È un sistema di videosorveglianza che dura, cioè nel senso c'è un crollo di uno stato emotivo che se non sei forte, cioè molte persone si stanno suicidando, molte persone all'interno delle case, da come leggo, cioè c'è molta violenza coniugale, e quindi in alcuni paesi qui vicino c'è stata una ragazza che è fuggita da casa perché non ha retto la fermatura, no? L'essere chiuso a casa. E ci sono state casi di violenza in un altro paese qui vicino. Non c'è un supporto psicologico per le persone che ne soffrono, come non hanno nessun tipo di sicurezza le persone che sono all'interno delle fabbriche, come non hanno nessun tipo di sicurezza le persone che sono in mezzo alle strade, non hanno casa.
Qui anche questa escalation di morti nelle case.
E ci sono stati dei casi a Palermo in cui la gente sta cominciando a rivoltare perché c'è fame fondamentalmente, i soldi sono pochi e quindi chi si trova dentro una determinata dinamica sociale non può più fare la spesa. E quindi hanno attaccato dei supermercati, il popolo sta morendo di fame e diciamo che siamo tutti verso quella vita fondamentalmente, già siamo schiacciati perché ci hanno tolto il diritto di movimento. So che già il governo all'interno del sito sapeva che dal 30 gennaio c'era in circolo questa cosa, ma non ha fermato i focolai, non ho utilizzato lo stesso sistema che hanno fatto a Pechino. I pesci all'interno della quale sono tanti e non dichiarano i fallimenti di tutti i governi. Hanno fallito.
According to federal data, nearly 80,000 people live in New York City shelters, in other forms of temporary housing, or on the street. Marcus Moore, known as the homeless poet, has had his ups and downs over the years. He tells me how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected him as someone who was recently living without shelter.
With all this COVID-19 going on, how have you been taking care of yourself?
Well, you know, Cyprus, it's really been hard on me because I've been used to being in my house that I took over a few years ago. I took over a house in Queens a few years ago. And, you know, I've been used to just going in the house with my key, locking my door, plopping down, and watching cable. You know what I'm saying? And so, just to speed it up a little bit, now for somehow I find myself, back in the street, visiting those old ghosts and demons again, and it's really been a challenge. As like, I can't believe this is me. And so now that this disease is popped up, now you gotta be careful where you sit at, on the train. You gotta constantly be looking at people like, please don't cough over me. You trying not to get sick, but when you on the train, people already have little sicknesses, little coughs and colds already.
So where have you been since the news of this COVID-19 outbreak started? Have you been just living on the train?
I've been on the train. I've been I basically try to be wherever I can be before I get on the train late in the night.
Are you at all concerned that you may have COVID-19?
I'm not. I'm normally a positive person, brother. Right? So, I haven't gotten checked out because I don't feel that I'm experiencing any symptoms, any problems like that. My only issue is sleep deprived. That's my illness right now, is sleep deprived and swollen ankles. And I hope that it don't lead up to swollen legs or fingers. You know what I'm saying?
So what's the issue with your swollen ankles? Is it you have edema of some sort?
When you are homeless, another word for undomiciled, if you're not laying down, your body part starts to swell up.
Do you have other friends who are also homeless? And what are their thoughts about what's happening with COVID-19? Are they dealing with the same issues that you are?
That's a good question, because everybody tries to be brave and not show fear. A lot of my folks are concerned and scared, because they really don't have nowhere to go. They really don't have a plan. And I see that. And I deal with a lot of intellectual people. Just because they might be undomiciled, they're very smart and intelligent people. They're no different from you and I. They're just without a dwelling, a structure that you can call home. And so they scared. They don't know what to do, where to go, who to trust. And it's just like that, All I got to say is folks, think the city forgot about them, We're not talking about folks who are already established with housing already. We're talking about the ones on the street corners, the ones that's living on the street. We're talking about that hardcore population, not already got a crib somewhere and they just moving them to somewhere else. No, we talking about the ones that people step over, ignore, don't see, don't want to see.
The homeless aren't the only group on the fringes of society being hard hit by coronavirus. There's another population that doesn't have the luxury of social distancing. People living and working in our nation's jails and prisons. Elizabeth Gaines is the executive director of the Osborne Association, a non-profit advocating for the rights of inmates. She spoke to us about the difficulties of doing that job during this current health crisis.
The notion of social distancing in prison is a bit of a cruel joke. So the coronavirus outbreak has been sort of game-changing for us in good and bad ways, I suppose. The bad news is that prisons and jails are the epicenter of the epicenter that we're in. People going in and out, so there's a constant terror about infection there and the lack of medical care there. So our focus has been two. One is to get as many people out as possible, and then to make sure that the people who are left behind are in the best possible conditions. that would mean everything from hand sanitizer and soap and water to being able to have mechanisms for staying connected to families during this time, making sure that there are medical provisions in place to make sure that people are tested and treated. The Asthma Association has been around a long time. Our founder was warden of Sing Sing in 1914, but our goal always has been to transform prisons for the people who live in them, work in them, and visit them. We focus a lot on families, children of incarcerated parents, because even though everyone seems to know there's a huge prison population, a lot of people don't realize that for every person in prison, there's a whole family that's connected to them. We are really stressed, worried about the people inside because we cannot communicate in our usual ways. We set up a remote reentry hotline for Rikers Island so that anybody inside can call to get help with discharge planning, or if they want us to communicate to their families. There's about 49,000 people in state prison. 20% of them or so are aging or older and serving long sentences and have very low risk scores. So, I mean, they really could comfortably release several thousand. I don't know that they will. And then that will make it safer for the people who are left behind. We've asked that they just literally, for anybody who's coming up for a hearing, a reappearance in the next 6 months, who's over 50, see them now. I mean, I know the public might have these thoughts about, they're just going to open the doors and let everybody out, but we're really talking mostly about people who, one, pose no risk to public safety, regardless of what they did 30 years ago. We have a reentry kit that some donors have enabled us to put together, so when someone comes out, they get socks and toothbrush and a couple of gift cards and hand sanitizer. And most people hopefully can return to their families, but it's a burden on families as well. So we want to make sure that we are providing the kind of support that will make a biggest difference. I would like to say that because I think that there are people that are waking up to the crisis of incarceration in America. And this virus is only one. There was a pandemic before that called mass incarceration, in which we see a straight line from chattel slavery to prisons today. I have a concern that as we focus on an illness that does affect everyone, that we will forget that there are certain groups of people, communities of color in particular, that will continue to be the hardest hit by anything like this. Not that they're going to be more contagious, but they will have less access to the services and supports.
On March 16th, New York City closed all public schools, at least until mid-April, in an attempt to curb the spread of coronavirus. The Department of Education moved instruction online, distributing iPads and setting up teachers with remote teaching models. But for parents and guardians at home, the task can come with a learning curve. One family described the challenges of adjusting to the unprecedented citywide experiment a week after it began. We hear more in this piece produced by Shannon Ayala.
If you become a mountain climber, said the little bunny,
I have two kids, and one is a second grader. He's almost 8. He goes to a charter school in our neighborhood, and the second one is 4, and he goes to pre-K in a public school. Right now, my wife and I take turns staying home. This has only been as of just this week, since everything's been happening so quickly. That's what we've worked out for the time being. So we take turns staying home with the kids. Some of the days she had to go to work and I stayed home, and the other days I went to work, she stayed home. And during that time, we basically try to squeeze in as many activities into the day. Some of them are educational, a lot of them are catching up on household duties that we've been needing to do, and now that we're home, we're doing both.
At home.
it's very difficult to homeschool 2 kids in a tiny New York apartment. We have a 1-bedroom apartment. One of them serves as our bedroom slash living room slash kitchen. So it's a very small space, and the kids have their own bedroom, but it's really not meant for doing a lot of schoolwork. That's not how we set it up, because we had certain lifestyle choices in place. It's been very difficult for us to set up any kind of structure to actually do schooling at home with the kids, in addition to the fact that they are in different levels. So they require individualized attention because it's a different type of environment, and they become distracted. It's their bedroom, so they, I'll ask them to do something, I walk away, they're playing with a toy because that's what's in their bedroom. So there have been a lot of distractions and similar types of challenges, and it's just been in terms of actually following the structures of the assignments that the schools have provided, it's been a real challenge.
In a trout stream, says mother, I will become a fisherman and I will fish for you.
For my older son's school, the teachers call during the day and check in with him to make sure he understands the assignments, to make sure that he's reading and responding to the readings. So on the days when I'm home and I'm able to supervise him, they will call my phone, and then he's able to talk to them, and I can follow along, and obviously I'll know what the teacher is saying. I can help him better understand that as well. But on the days when my wife is home, because she is deaf, she doesn't use her like a regular phone. She would use a video phone, but to call, it's a little bit more complicated, and it's also not set up appropriately in our home right now because she usually uses the one at work. But since she's not able to go to her workplace at this time, for as long as there's still a lot of limitations in place, she would be working from home, and for her, it's very difficult to oversee that type of check-in from the teacher, because teacher is speaking directly to our son, who's using his hearing and his speech, but my wife uses sign language, and so for her it's a different mode, and she wouldn't be able to follow what the teacher is saying. So that's an additional challenge specifically in our family.
Finally from us, New Rochelle, a suburb of New York City, was New York State's first hot zone and eventually became the model for the rest of the state's social distancing guidelines. Gary Pierre reports on what life was like in that community during the early stages of the disease.
In early March, New Rochelle became the epicenter of New York's coronavirus outbreak when Lawrence Garbuz tested positive. Garbuz, a lawyer who commutes to his Manhattan law firm, subsequently infected his family and some neighbors. Shortly afterward, Governor Andrew Cuomo and local officials took what seemed then to be the draconian steps of creating a 1-mile radius containment area. The governor also deployed the National Guard to deliver groceries to residents and clean buildings in the containment zone. Those steps are now being hailed as turning back the tide in the suburban city of 80,000 people as the rate of infection has slowed. Sydney Littlejohn lives in the containment area.
It's changed a lot. I used to go to work every day, 7 a.m. Haven't been doing that. I was babysitting, and it's not really safe for me to be around another family all day in their house. And then also I did a lot of yoga. As you know, gyms and such have closed, so I don't do that. And I say my physical activity has definitely been limited inside of the house, but I've been trying to go on walks and stuff to maintain that. But I do have a lot more free time, which it's good. I've been doing a lot more reading than I had time to do before, and spending a lot more time with my family.
Littlejohn says more could have been done despite the kudos heaped on the containment area.
I think that everyone inside the containment bubble should have been able to get tested immediately. And, but yeah, other than that, there has really been no difference between what people living inside the containment bubbles to people living elsewhere in New Rochelle or anywhere else.
In March, Little John spent her 23rd birthday while she was under quarantine. This time, while the celebration was tamped down, Little John remained strong. For Diverse City, I'm Gary Pierre.
Thanks for staying tuned this month. As I leave, I'd like to leave you with this quote attributed to Mark Twain. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting in the face of it. I think we can all use a little courage right now as we face these dark days. Until the next time, I'm Zyphus Lebrun.